In July 2019, Microsoft committed $1 billion to OpenAI in what would become a defining AI partnership, tying OpenAI's core work to Microsoft Azure through an exclusive cloud arrangement. Microsoft funded OpenAI, supplied a computing backbone built on NVIDIA GPUs, and positioned itself as the main route to bring OpenAI technology into real products through Microsoft Copilot. In 2019, that looked like a sensible answer to a real cloud problem because it promised speed, credibility, and a clear platform story while competing against Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud Platform. The long-term cost arrived later. It showed up as commitments that were hard to reshape. In 2018, cloud computing already rewarded size and reliability. The biggest providers like Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and Azure won by offering deep capacity, strong tools for builders, and fewer outages that could interrupt business operations. Azure was expanding against Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud Platform, yet the market still demanded proof that Microsoft could lead the next era, not only match what Amazon and Google offered. That pressure made differentiation feel urgent rather than optional. Cloud buyers can move spend between Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and Azure. That reality set the constraint. By 2019, the clearest signal came from AI's appetite for compute, because training large models depends on large GPU clusters, fast connections between many servers, and enough power and cooling to stay stable under heavy load. Only a small group of organizations could supply that infrastructure mix at scale, and tight hardware availability made it easier for hyperscalers to pull ahead. Subscribe for more calm breakdowns of business choices and trade-offs. The pressure to act against Amazon Web Services and Google was already building. Around the same time, Microsoft's internal logic pointed beyond research and toward commercialization through products like Microsoft 365 Copilot. Commercialization means turning a lab system into a dependable service with security controls, predictable pricing, and support that enterprise buyers recognize through Microsoft 365 and GitHub Copilot. Microsoft already had distribution into large organizations through familiar products and long-standing IT relationships, which meant it could connect frontier capability to where customers already worked. That made tight alignment feel practical in a market where customers reward integration. Competitive timing added weight in 2018 and 2019 because rivals like Google Cloud were investing in AI and building their own cloud services, which made a slow approach costly against Amazon Web Services and emerging competition. Building a unique edge from scratch can take years when the edge depends on data centers powered by GPU and on specialized engineers, and that timeline rarely matches how quickly developers form platform habits. A partnership with OpenAI offered faster credibility against Google's AI efforts and Amazon's cloud dominance. Speed mattered. The decision landed on July 22, 2019, when Microsoft and OpenAI announced an exclusive partnership that placed OpenAI's core workloads on Azure instead of spreading them across Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, or other providers. Being the exclusive cloud provider meant Azure became the default home for training and serving, rather than splitting work across multiple clouds. Microsoft also became the preferred partner to commercialize OpenAI's technology through GitHub Copilot and Microsoft 365 Copilot, linking product rollout and capacity planning to a shared path. The agreement set the relationship's center of gravity. Microsoft did not choose a vague direction that day. It chose a specific structure that required ongoing coordination around GPU infrastructure. Azure would build supercomputing capacity tuned to OpenAI's needs, and OpenAI would depend on that environment as it scaled. In 2019, the alternative path was easy to describe. Microsoft could have stayed a neutral supplier to many AI labs, and that would have lowered dependence, but it would have left Azure with a weaker differentiator against Amazon Web Services. In late 2019 and 2020, the upside looked straightforward because OpenAI needed dependable compute and Microsoft needed proof that Azure could host the hardest AI workloads in technology, competing directly with Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud. Building for a partner that pushes GPU limits often improves a platform for everyone because it forces upgrades in networking, scheduling, storage, and infrastructure reliability that later become standard capabilities. That spillover effect can be real. The partnership also pushed Azure to learn new operational patterns that Amazon Web Services and Google were developing. Microsoft's distribution advantage strengthened the case in 2020 and 2021 because it could offer a packaged route through Microsoft 365 Copilot and GitHub Copilot, instead of asking customers to assemble infrastructure, models, and controls on their own. Large organizations value standard procurement, clear support contracts, and predictable security practices, and Microsoft already knew how to deliver that through its enterprise products. Many companies wanted AI benefits without becoming model operators or managing AWS infrastructure. Convenience became part of the product. Another early gain came from pace in 2020 and 2021 because model capabilities improved quickly and customers paid attention to who could ship usable tools like GitHub Copilot rather than just demos. Coordination can become a hidden bottleneck in fast cycles, since training, serving, and product integration must move together to deliver real value, and tight alignment can shorten that path against AWS and Google timelines. That speed advantage supported Microsoft's release cadence. Momentum followed. The long horizon intent became clearer in January 2023, when Microsoft described a third phase with a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar investment that implied a sustained infrastructure build rather than a short experiment. Capacity. Scarcity sat at the center, meaning limited hardware supply, limited data center capacity, and the time required to build new sites, while the incentive stayed familiar, to differentiate Azure from AWS and Google Cloud, and to connect advanced models to products customers already used. Tight coupling reduced flexibility. That trade-off stayed quiet at first. During 2023, exclusivity still felt like an advantage against Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud, because one cloud and one roadmap reduce coordination costs when development moves quickly and reliability expectations stay high. Buyers also value clarity, since a consistent enterprise interface makes procurement and compliance easier than managing multiple cloud providers, and internal teams can standardize on Microsoft 365 Copilot rather than switching between platforms. The partnership gave developers a simple story to build around. That pull can strengthen a platform against Amazon Web Services. The first hidden cost became more visible in 2024 when Microsoft's investor disclosures and earnings commentary pointed to higher expected spending tied to cloud growth and AI infrastructure alongside capacity constraints. CapEx, short for capital spending, is money spent on long-lived assets like data centers and equipment, and it rises when demand requires more physical build-out. When one partner's workloads rank among the most compute-hungry in the world, the obligation shifts from hosting to continuous building. Build cycles are slow. A second cost also sharpened in 2024 because serving models at scale is continuous, and it rises with usage spikes, product launches like Microsoft 365 Copilot, and enterprise expansions. Once businesses rely on AI features in daily workflows, reliability expectations climb, and an outage becomes more than a technical issue for the customer. That pushes providers to reserve capacity and engineer redundancy with less flexibility than before. Serving never really stops. It becomes the baseline. Operational trade-offs grew clearer through 2024 as well, because large AI workloads consume more than compute capacity, and they demand specialized engineering attention for tuning, capacity management, and reliability under heavy load. Those skills are scarce inside any cloud organization, and they compete with other priorities that also need investment and leadership focus. As one partner grows quickly, its infrastructure roadmap can pull resources toward itself. Allocation becomes the story. Dependency risk became easier to see in late 2023 when OpenAI experienced a public governance disruption involving Sam Altman that created short-term uncertainty about leadership and direction. The episode did not need to last long to matter, because it revealed how tightly Microsoft had linked its infrastructure and product narrative to a partner it did not control. Concentration risk does not require wrongdoing. It only requires surprise. Regulatory scrutiny added another layer in 2024 and 2025, because regulators including the UK Competition and Markets Authority and the European Commission examined the Microsoft and OpenAI relationship and whether it raised concerns about influence, control, or market effects. Scrutiny can exist even when relationships remain legal and common in the industry, and the practical impact is friction when the market is moving quickly. Under that kind of attention, contract changes carry more weight, and the pace of adjustment can slow. Slower adjustment becomes its own cost. Expectations became a constraint across 2024 and 2025, once enterprises and developers viewed Azure as the main home for OpenAI scale capacity powered by GPU infrastructure. Expectations can bind almost like contracts, because failing them can push customers to seek AWS or Google Cloud alternatives, even when the product is strong. Data center build cycles and power contracts do not move at internet speed, so the gap between demand curves and build timelines creates steady pressure. That pressure rarely stays local, it spreads across planning. A visible adaptation arrived on January 21, 2025, when Microsoft described a shift in how exclusivity for new capacity would work through a right of first refusal model. A right of first refusal means Microsoft gets the first chance to supply additional compute, but OpenAI can look to other alternatives if Microsoft cannot meet needs on acceptable terms. That language pointed to a practical limit. Flexibility had become necessary. The meaning of that 2025 change went beyond legal wording, because exclusivity can look clean when a relationship is smaller, yet it can become constraining when the relationship becomes a pillar of infrastructure planning. Preserving momentum now meant acknowledging that OpenAI's needs had outgrown the earlier shape of the arrangement, especially under capacity scarcity and regulatory scrutiny at the same time. The trade-off that felt quiet in 2019 started shaping the contract. That shift set up the next step. The structural turn arrived on October 28, 2025, when both companies described a new phase of the agreement. OpenAI said it had contracted to purchase an incremental $250 billion of Azure services, alongside a stated ambition to support very large new data center capacity through projects described in the tens of billions. Microsoft would no longer have a right of first refusal to be OpenAI's compute provider, which meant Azure stayed central while the exclusivity mechanism loosened. That combination marked a point where ongoing renegotiation became part of the operating model. Scale required optionality. Those two facts sit together for a reason. Microsoft secured enormous demand on Azure, supporting long-term utilization of new data center capacity and reinforcing Azure's role in AI infrastructure against AWS and Google Cloud, while it also gave up a contractual lever that had protected future exclusivity on new compute. The partnership remained valuable, but the balance shifted toward flexibility, and managing trade-offs became a permanent task rather than a temporary phase. Planning burden does not fade, it becomes routine. By January 2026, Credible reporting described talks about very large new investments tied to OpenAI's operating costs and infrastructure needs, and the signal remained consistent, even if terms could evolve over time. Subscribe for more decisions that made sense, until they didn't. The 2019 choice had a real constraint behind it, a rational incentive driving it against AWS and Google Cloud, and a trade-off that arrived later through capacity pressure, dependency, and regulatory scrutiny, which is why it made sense until it didn't.